Now, speaking of people who aren't winning many prizes nowadays, obviously Astralis, they didn't even make the playoffs of ESL Pro League where the top 12 teams were playing. Obviously, they had the nice run in Cologne, but even so, they didn't look like a team that was capable of winning the tournament. And by the way, this performance at Pro League is despite Farlig, their AWPer, the guy who's mainly criticised the most, especially because people think Device is coming back, having the best tournament of his entire time in Astralis. Now, then you got to add in this drama that maybe now k0nfig might get kicked or replaced, and some sort of behind-the-scenes stuff going on there, which he even sort of inadvertently confirmed to some degree. And then, of course, there's the rumours that have always been swirling ever since late last year, and especially this year, I heard them myself around the major, which goes, maybe Device comes back to Astralis. Now, sure, it seems like no progress has been made there. Other teams are in the mix now. It's sounding like it's about how much money they can get for him. So I don't know that Astralis is going to get him. I'm getting the feeling at the moment, maybe not. Maybe that actually it's a different team's going to get him. So you look at Farley, you look at the AWP, and you look at Astralis. They're all intertwined. And it's a major reason why I think Astralis cannot be an event contender with this particular lineup, and has not been, quite frankly, even when they've had their best ever runs and their best team performances by Farley himself. So you look first of all at the team structure, and what you've got to consider is this: because they lack a star AWPer, an AWPer you can play around, it has hurt most of the players in the team, and the concept, the identity of the team doesn't really work. They're not a strong enough rifle team. They're not a team with a deep enough map pool overall. They're not amazing enough on any one map. And as a result, like, even when you've got some pretty good players and some very experienced players, it doesn't matter. It means Astralis is somewhat toothless. They're not really able to ever be a team with that strong identity who you know will take down big teams. So let's start just with the head, right? Glaive. They've got the greatest in-game leader of all time in CSGO. I don't even know that I would say k0nfig is the GOAT IGL. I can make the case for it. I was one of the first people to do that and be building that narrative over many years, but that was more from like a devil's advocate position. I actually think if I had to pick right now, I probably would still say Glaive. So the problem is, you have the greatest in-game leader of all time still playing in your team. That should be a massive advantage, right? Well, sometimes it can be, like stylistically as an IGL, I do sometimes see that the old Glaive's in there. I see him switch it up in the middle of a late round scenario or in a mid round and just make a call that I can see it's clearly just coming out of his mind then. It's not something they had planned. It wasn't a timing that we were trying to hit. I do think he still calls fairly well around his own entries, around his own kills. A classic feature of his, by the way, often reminded me of Ave, his former coach this year. And also, that was the guy that Zonic played with, his coach before that. I always thought the key to these guys was they were also able to contribute and call and sometimes be an entry player. Whereas obviously the hard thing, as you see from k0nfig's career, is if you have to be the entry and call, it's hard to frag as well, especially if you're trying to make other people better, right? The problem is the best periods of Glaive's whole career come when he has the best dedicated Danish AWPer. So in the early page, people might know this team, Western Wolves, where they're finishing second to NIP. Yeah, their player was called Nico, N-I-C-O, and he was a guy who later played in Dignitas with MSL, and he was the best Danish AWPer and one of the better AWPers in the game, and you could absolutely, he was the star of that team that they played around. Later, of course, it was Device with the Kierby and the Megask lineups, winning all those MVPs, winning majors with him. Now, when you have a player like that, a true bona fide number one option, best AWPer, you can call completely differently and structure your team completely differently than you just, if you have a good AWPer and you just have an okay AWPer. If you have a bad AWPer, it's completely night and day. So when you have that very good superstar AWP, you can do things like you can use him to just cut off an area of the map. They have to cross this area. If they don't, he's holding the line of sight. It's the advantage to the AWPer. Then they can't be in that area of the map. You can use process of elimination to know where people are without even doing an information play. He can hold a site solo, allowing you to rotate off B-bomb site on Inferno and gamble a fourth guy near that arch or something so they can't take the control of that area, right? Then you can have one CT spot that just becomes utterly dominant and is so deadly that naturally now the opponent tries to play away from that or has to use massive amounts of utility to even peek the spot and know who's there. And as a result, if they go away from that site, you're funneling people to the other site where maybe you've already gambled a CT position. You can use them on T side to get picks that otherwise you maybe wouldn't get with a rifle. You can counter the enemy AWPer if they have a very good player, especially if yours is better. You can overcome a utility deficit because on the CT side, he can just hit shot after shot after shot and reposition without necessarily having to. Use utility to get back in a position, use smokes to retake areas. And then you can also, of course, if they're a real, true number one superstar AWPer, this is an area that I always thought Skadoodle lacked in, is they take initiative themselves. They'll call their shot and say, set me up, give me it this way. You know what, give me an AWP even when we do like a crazy like gamble force spike. Just someone give me an AWP, I'll go get a kill right now. You can't do that when you got Farlig or Lucky or Hades or this level of player. It's not going to work the same way as when it's a device. I mean, forget the Nikos and Simples and Zewus. They're just on another level in general as players. We're talking just about AWPing style at this point in time. So I will say this for glaive. Post-device, his teams haven't looked good, and he's himself looked very bad. Like, before anyone tries to suggest, yeah, but maybe glaive made device. Well, you did watch Counter-Strike, in my opinion. Like, k0nfig had device at a very good level in 2015. There's a period around the autumn where I actually thought device was the best player in the world. In 2016, the team wasn't as good, but device was hard carrying most of the year until glaive came on board. It was a really strong player and had fully dedicated to becoming a primary AWPer. And quite frankly, when glaive first came into the team with the late 2016-2017 roster, before they got in Magisk, device actually arguably had the peak of his career in terms of like individual dominance and just how good he was game to game to game. He was absolutely unbelievable how good he was. So the idea it was like glaive, I don't think so. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't check out. And then obviously device left Astralis and went to an IP. Those first few months he was looking really good. There's a reason that they were in a position to win tournaments, right? And this is a guy where I think of all the players in the post Astralis GOAT lineup era, he's looked the best of the five, far and away. Even his like slump towards the end of 2021, he was still the best of all of them. So I don't think that angle works at all, the idea that glaive's what made him in that sense. It's actually, he benefited glaive in a massive degree. Then you look at glaive's game, he used to be the guy where he could just get way more frags than you should be able to as an IGL, as an entry player, right? He's a very low fragging player now. Go and look. He's a player who dies way more than he gets kills. Now, some of them are impact, yeah, because he's still a guy who knows how to use himself. But this isn't the glaive of 3-4 years ago at this point in time. And before anyone hits me with the whole, like, yeah, but who cares? He's already won his majors. What does that even mean? You try and win as many as you can. You try and break the record, push it beyond anyone will ever reach. You try and get 7 majors. People haven't even got to 4 yet. So you're just trying to make it impossible for anyone to come after you. This thing of like, oh, it doesn't matter. How do you know that? That's just what a fanboy says when they just don't want it to count now when their player's losing. But then when my player's losing, it's supposed to get, no, that's just silly little games. That's like trying to take your ball and go home with it. Yeah, fuck off then, mate. Like, if you ain't into it, then don't play. Like, oh, he makes his money. Only a young man or a loser thinks like, yeah, but he's got his money, so who cares? One day that money will be gone. And then what people will do is look at this era and go, why wasn't his team very good? I thought it was the GOAT IGL. Like, didn't you have k0nfig and BlameF and Zipnix were still there? Like, what the fuck? These are big names. Like, what? Why is this team so whack? That's what people will think. And that's what they should think, by the way. They should ask that question. It's one of the reasons I'm making this video, to try and explain to you how flawed this lineup is. It can't win. I don't think. But I tell you what, glaive, I mean, if he is the GOAT, let's be real. I'll just say it right now. On paper, this lineup right now, in terms of name value, is better than the mouse spots that k0nfig inherited. Like, what are you talking about? So then you look at BlameF, right? Best player in the team. The most impact in the team in a holistic sense, because he just puts up numbers again and again and again. He always puts up his numbers. He always gets his first 1 or 2 kills that he's supposed to get. He even gets the extra ones. I think this is a guy where, even though, yes, his style inflates the number of frags and the differential due to being a bit more passive and defensive. Yeah, that's true. But in this team, how the fuck else is he supposed to play? Like, it makes perfect sense in this team to play that way. It'd just be giving up kills and giving up chances to win otherwise. Being selfless in this team wouldn't make sense for BlameF. And he is performing against everyone. The best teams in the world on any maps. He's always performing. And by the way, he doesn't get full credit for that, because we're just baiting. Yeah, let me see your player go and bait and be as good as this guy. He won't be. Spoiler, he won't be. He will be worse than this guy. He won't be able to pull it off. It's still really hard to do what this guy is doing. And remember, when everyone knows he's doing it. Because the key thing for me with BlameF is my biggest problem was always that he was the IGL and he did it. That was my issue. If he's not the IGL, and he isn't in this team, he is a very good player. Now, yeah, true, he's a super defensive player. He will play passive. He will save sometimes. He won't go for the aggro plays. He might not go for something in a late round scenario like the best players in the world would. Yeah, that's why I have my own little nickname. I call him BlameF is what I call Blame, or you can just call him blame in that sense, can't you? BlameF. You like that one? Because it's like the rifle version of what James does with the AWP, isn't it? Except the difference is James the IGL. Hence, one of my concerns of those two roles overlapping. I don't have a problem with BlameF at this point in time. I can work with BlameF and make a number one team in the world. You give me the right pieces. He's doing his job like a motherfucker. I also will say, just like James, it's really hard to play against that style. You think when you're observing it, or you know what everyone is on the map with no like lack of information like they all have in the game, you think, oh, it'd be easy to shut this down. Oh, he's obviously around that corner. No, that's why when they're at their peak, players like Get Right, Happy, Hiko, if you want to go back to 1.6, Conte, these guys are notoriously hard to play against, just like James, because every other player that plays that style, that plays that role is playing the more aggressive style when they're actually as skilled as these guys are. And so they're training you how not to play against Get Right, Happy, Conte, Hiko, BlameF, etc. But let's be real, the problem with his style of play, because it isn't very aggressive, and because it isn't about just recklessly going for things and playing off raw aim, it's about positioning, it's about understanding timing, it's about like calculating what's going on. By the way, a very Astralis style of play, let's be real from BlameF. It isn't going to hard carry games in terms of the wins, the biggest rounds, break the game open, take an opponent that's outperforming you and just take him on completely, smash a better team who you have no business. You're not going to do that if you have this play. It's why, if you notice, when Stown's rating was really high, it was like top 5 player in the world on LAN, I was saying, yeah, he might be the best Danish player, but he has the same problem. He can't snap the game. He can't break the matrix. He's still a player within the system who has to take what the system and the game gives to him, and he can make the most of that, but he's not going to be a Nico, a Simple, a Zebu, these sorts of players. Now, let's be real. You want to look at the idea of where the structure in the team goes. Yeah, BlameF can be your best player. That can work. But you're going to need a pretty strong second star, because now you need to add something stylistically to offset some of BlameF's weaknesses. Now, some of his strengths can offset some of your weaknesses too. He can clean up like a motherfucker. We'll come back to that though, because that's going to be a key concept here. Then we'll just quickly go to Xyp9x, shall we? Xyp9x sucks this year. This is the worst year of Xyp9x's career, following the previous worst year of Xyp9x's career, following the previous worst year of Xyp9x's career. It's going downhill year on year on year on year. And yeah, it just sucks, doesn't it? Now, let's be real. He does still win clutches. Like, actually, he wins probably more than you realise. But his skills are just too bad. And he looks mentally checked out in some of these games. Like, if Glaive was fragging better at the old level, and they had some sort of star number 2 or number 1 option AWPer, and they keep k0nfig to go along with BlameF, then yeah, I think Xyp9x could probably get away with it. I think it could maybe work just enough. He could just play off his brain, just like some of the players who aren't even that skilled do, who are in some of the really good supportive elements. But that isn't the team they're in right now. And so he just becomes another major liability, along with Glaive's fragging, and then along with the farlig as the AWPer. Now, we'll come to the man that obviously this video was centered around, but not specifically just him. It's the fact of what he's unable to bring to the team. And that is, of course, farlig, the AWPer. Now, this is a guy where, I'll give him this, at least they let him AWP. Unlike what they did to Lockie, where they just strung him along, then he wasn't the AWPer, but he should be the AWPer, so that means then Glaive's AWPing, and then later k0nfig. Like, that was whack. Like, at least they let this guy have the AWP, and as a result, he has a chance to get some kills. I don't think, though, he's been that much better a player overall. Like, he hasn't really been able to impact the game as much. Maybe in the game he can get kills that Lockie can't, or wouldn't get, or wouldn't go for, or be in position, or trusted to go for. But he's not particularly that much better at fragging, quite frankly. And he is using the most expensive gun in terms of the guns that are functionally bought in the game. He's only had one good tournament while he's been in Astralis, and that was that ESL Pro League that we've just watched them get knocked out in the group stage of now. And then, and by the way, it wasn't the strongest group. Like, he was good at the RMR, but then not that good at the major. So to me, the key thing with this guy is, it doesn't seem like they can, or quite frankly should, play around him that much. It also makes me think, by the way, that Glaive's calling doesn't automatically defer to the AWPer and set the AWPer up and use the AWPer for picks. It actually makes me think it's more Device's game. The fact that Glaive inherited a fully complete star number 1 option AWPer that was a top 3-5 player in the world. And I think Device's game and Device's mentality not only would have meant Glaive would be stupid not to use him in those ways, and also Zonic was there, who, remember, I've often pointed out, they in MTW used Sunder to some degree to get these picks and play these crazy mobile CT spots a la Device in Astralis. I think it's the mentality of device that at this point in time understood I have to take the game by the scruff of the neck. I have to reposition and battle this other AWPer and find their weak spots. When you have a player that wants to take initiative like that, you'd be a fool not to let them do. That's what every IGL dreams of. But when they don't do that, and when they're just a player in the pack and like, what do I do now, coach? What do I do now, boss? What do I do now, leader? That's when it's a totally different kettle of fish, isn't it? That's not the guy you're going to just throw out there. So you look at this guy, he's having tournament after tournament after tournament, where he's getting like 0.6 kills per round. This is like support player level numbers, by the way, or less than that, sometimes 0.5 something, on LAN with the AWP, a super expensive gun. How could you play around someone like that? How could you? That's nowhere close to good enough, especially not for what people like BlameF and k0nfig should demand of teammates and the team that houses them, for how good their game is. It's going to make you a huge liability in terms of playing against strong AWPing teams, in terms of playing maps that are dedicated to the AWP, in terms of it's going to destroy your economy. It's going to make you waste rounds saving AWPs that actually you're not going to get much use out of. You're not giving that to ZywOo, you're giving it to not Lucky, you're giving it to farlig at this point in time. Simple and ZywOo don't even save that much. If they have the AWPer there at the end, they're going to go for the round. They're the best players in the world. Is this guy? It'd be a fool to who's going to lose the AWP. So you're just limiting yourself as a team, and then you're not getting that much out of the AWP anyway. You get 0.6 kills per round. Quite frankly, k0nfig, when he was AWPing, sometimes looked like the better AWPer because he can be aggressive, because he can hit that first bullet so much. He's got nice reactions and aim. It's not a better overall holistic AWPer. He knows how to play the role as a primary AWPer. It's not an option in that sense. But at least he was doing it, right? At least it made sense. Then how about this? Let's go to k0nfig, because I think this is the most maligned guy on this team. People act like he's trash, or like he's just bad, he's just slumped. Like, he is the second best player on this team, and it is quite clear. But the problem is that is the issue as well. Like, he is still a good to very good entry player. He still has great aim. He still frags really well, especially on a team that loses a lot. I don't care when it comes to k0nfig. It's like Fur. I don't care what his rating or his differential is, right? This guy frags. Like, go look at tournaments. He's a guy who's going to average like 0.75 KPR, kills per round, as the fucking entry, and sometimes a hard entry, and you just know he's the entry. And on certain maps, you know it is up to him to entry to give you a chance on that T side. It isn't the genius tactics of Glaive that are winning these rounds. It's actually k0nfig just busting the game wide open. He was, let's be real, the win condition on Ancient, the map that they abused for months and months and months to give themselves a chance against the top teams in series to get to a third map. He was the key player most of the time when they play Mirage, the map that obviously they weren't playing for a while when it was their permaban with the old lineup. He has been a massive weapon for Glaive, and I don't necessarily that Glaive's like misused him. I think it's just that he does the most he can do at this point in time, and I don't think he's playing badly at all, quite frankly. I think the problem is people expect him to be a true second star like an Electronic back in the day, Spinks now in Vitality, Axile on Gambit. I'd argue he's maybe the number one star, but obviously numbers wise, you got to give it to Shiro, right? The problem is if you expect him to be able to be in that role, I think you're naive. And here's why. Because his role makes it super hard to frag out really hard and make a big differential gap. You can get the kills, he does. He does a really good job fragging, but you're going to die a lot as well. And that means people have to follow you up. That means the rest of the team structure has to be able to do something. And that means you have to be able to get BlameF into a position where he can lurk and win the round for you. If he doesn't, he's just getting those exit kills. He's saving his gun and he's killing people who chase him. You can't activate BlameF unless you have k0nfig. But then when you have k0nfig, that's just step one of activating BlameF. There's got to be something in the middle, right? And if what's in the middle is Glaive and farlig, two low fragging players, especially relative to their roles, then you're not going to make good use of those openings, are you? Now also, think about what those players have that I listed before, those like other rifle players. Like, Electronic has Simple, the greatest of all time, arguably still in his prime. Not as much now, but arguably overall. And he has Bit, one of the best rookies and aggressive players of the last few years, right? Spinks has ZywOo, another like GOAT level player. Axile has Shiro, a super dominant defensive AWPer, and Hobbit, another entry player with massive experience and good skills. Like, mate, what does k0nfig have? He has BlameF. That's it. That's all he has. Or BlameF has k0nfig, whichever way around you want to say it. So when people are hating on him because he can't do impossible shit like he did in that first tournament with this lineup at the Blast 4 finals, mate, even Axile is a guy who struggles to do that regularly. People like Twists, who's winning everything. He has Brokey and Rops and even Rain sometimes. But even then, the team still needs his openings for those players to be activated and to be as good, right? So in this case, what do you want k0nfig to do? He's not a miracle worker. He's just a really good entry player. So you look at the stars and the strengths of this team, and people always ignore my terminology because they take it, but they don't understand the concept of it. When I talked about the first star and the second star and the third star and how the third star should be a different style of player depending on what style of team you want and what the strengths of the stars are and what sort of structure you've got. When you have this set properly with your number 1 and number 2 stars, it provides a structure and a flow to make it streamlined as to who does what and where the fragging's going to go. I took some of the concepts from like Dota and League of Legends, the way that they divide up the farm and play through certain lanes. That's what it's all about. You've got to understand your team identity. The dream generally, by the way, is that one of the stars, 1 or 2, is a dominant AWPer and the other one is a dominant rifler. Ideally, one of the two is aggressive. If you can have that, you've got the perfect start to a team. It's one of the reasons I'm so up on Vitality at the moment. I even think in the future, if he keeps playing like he is, Monacy's going to be the reason G2 gets sunk. It's not Huxley, it's Monacy, mate. And the team in general, he's really good. BlameF is totally fine. In fact, he's more than fine. He's very good. But where's the middle of the round, like I said? The AWPer would be that missing piece. Trick out farlig and put in a good AWPer. It doesn't have to be Device. If it's Device, we can start talking about being a dark horse to win tournaments, assuming that Glaive actually does still have the tactical know-how when he has the pieces. This could have been Dexter, really strong guy. It could even have been like sort of the poor man's Spanish Device. Sun Pius, right? I'll take him over farlig any day. If you could get someone like Monacy, I think someone like Glaive, assuming his head's in the game, could absolutely tear up a whole bunch of tournaments potentially. Even Sirison, you think his impact wouldn't be really good if he was on Astralis? How about if we want to really gamble on an old name who's maybe got something still in the How about ochs? The aggression of ochs playing with Glaive and with k0nfig in that entry pack. Mate, you could tear some games up. You could tear some games up with these guys, but not with farlig, I'm afraid. Then you look at the map pool. What's hilarious is the best map over the years, obviously Ancient. But even then, loads of the big wins are coming early on when other people haven't figured that out yet. Then you consider, obviously, they were going into Nuke, quite a lot of classic map. Obviously, the map that Glaive arguably had the best run ever on in the prime Astralis. Yeah, they're beating some good teams, right? But this is another map where, okay, they could be up, they could be down. They can lose to Complexity, they can lose to Heat, they can lose to Furia, but they could beat Na'Vi, that might mate. The actual number of wins on this map, go look. They haven't got that many big wins with this lineup this year. Like the actual, it's a little bit inflated that because obviously they're picking it in loads of series against bad teams as well, right? Then they had the Overpass. That's more of an AWP map. You notice, by the way, Ancient and New, they're not really that big, the biggest maps for AWP. Then you got Overpass though, right? Ooh, Overpass. Who are they beating on that? Ents, Heroic. So they were beating Hades and Cadian. Not the dominant AWPers in the world, right? No. They were losing loads of their games to the top teams. Then they have the Inferno. It used to be one of the best maps ever for Glaive. That's a map they have a losing record on. That's a map where big wins, they beat Cloud9 on it. Well, by the way, it's a mad dodgy map for Cloud9. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows that right now. They got loads of L's to the top teams here. That's another map, by the way, that shouldn't even need an AWP necessarily. On Mirage, map that you do sort of need one, they're beating the likes of Ents and Furia and Cloud9 and Ents again. And there was the odd Vitality one you can throw in there, but I think it was before they had this lineup. Like, this isn't that crazy, is it? It's not really that amazing. And then forget Dust2 and Vertigo. They pretty much have, I think. So you look, they even tend, by the way, to just pick their best maps. They were picking Ancient, they were picking Nuclear. They threw in the odd Overpass, someone who couldn't play it. They tried some Inferno and Mirage, it just didn't really work. So yeah, I think you look at the style of this team, you look at where their strengths are, you look at the lack of super strengths on maps, you look at the fact that it's people like k0nfig just giving you an Ancient win condition. It's people like BlameF making up for 2 other people not being able, 3 other people not being able to frag. Like, mate, people have actually criticised the stars of this team too much, let the IGL off way too easily, just ignored the support being bad because he's a legend, and everyone's focusing on this young AWPer who, quite frankly, it's irresponsible at this point to keep telling this guy he has to frag out and be a carry. He can't do it. And the rest of the team's not that good anyway that he becomes the only factor. It's just that because of the way the game works, and the structure and the setup of the roles and the stars, he does become the glaring point, because if you were to replace that piece with a more competent, better AWPer that's either more dominant in terms of kills or you can structure the team around, Astralis immediately becomes a better squad, right? This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Hades GOUD, Kai L,
Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Pacy, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Thooorin, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers on who's going to be the upcoming interview subjects in my content? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me about anything in esports? Well, if so, all of the above perks are available if you put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.